Pakchuk Rinpoche and Eric Solomon, Radically Happy, A User's Guide to the Mind. Narrated by Alex Vincent and Oliver Maines.
Pretty much everyone in the world wants to be happy and free from suffering. But most of us are incredibly bad at predicting what will really make us happy. We search for happiness in possessions like houses or cars, or in circumstances like being in a beautiful setting or having an awesome job. The reality is, none of these things will give us true happiness. At best, we'll achieve a fleeting sense of joy that disappears as quickly as it came. Real happiness, what the authors call radical happiness, is a sense of lasting well-being that sticks with us even when the going gets rough. So how do you get some for yourself? These blinks will tell you.
Blink 1 of 9.
Consider the following scenario. One day you wake up to find yourself in a hospital bed, with fluorescent lights glaring at you from above. A few minutes go by as you nervously wonder what's going on. Finally, a doctor walks in. She tells you that you were hit by a car, and you're now paralyzed from the waist down. Okay, now let's switch to a different scenario. In this one, you're blinking and groggy as your partner excitedly shakes you awake from a deep sleep. He tells you that the lottery ticket you bought a few weeks ago is now worth $150 million. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy do you think you'd feel in each of these situations? And how much happiness do you think you'd feel a year after? Chances are that your current answers to these questions are wrong.
The key message here is, genuine happiness has nothing to do with possessions or circumstances.
It's obvious that winning the lottery would make you much happier than learning that you're paralyzed, right? Actually, no. At least not in the long run. Immediately after hearing the news in each of these scenarios, you'll likely feel a boost of either happiness or depression. But those feelings won't last. A 1978 study of paraplegic people and lottery winners determined that just a year after finding out the news, the happiness levels of both groups had returned to exactly where they had been before. It turns out that most people aren't so great at determining the causes of happiness. But this is why it's so essential to come to terms with the truth. Circumstances and possessions don't lead to real, sustained happiness. You might feel like this is obvious. After all, you've read countless Hallmark cards telling you that money can't buy happiness. But your actions may tell a different story. You're probably still trying to find meaning and satisfaction by changing your surroundings or seeking out a well-paying job. And this turns out to be a vicious cycle. Every time you obtain comfort and pleasure, it's not long before you start worrying about where to find the next set of pleasurable circumstances. Or you try to determine how to prolong your joy so it never goes away. You can't find lasting happiness in circumstances. So where exactly does it come from?
Blink 2 of 9.
One of the authors, Pakchuk Rinpoche, grew up in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. In accordance with Tibetan custom, he was chosen as the latest incarnation of a great and highly respected meditation instructor. This meant Rinpoche had many expectations and obligations foisted upon him. But instead of accepting them graciously, Rinpoche became increasingly angry. He blew off steam by engaging in debates with fellow students, while he secretly fantasized about beating them up. Eventually, Rinpoche decided he needed to speak with one of his meditation instructors about his feelings. He asked what he should do about all of his anger and aggression. The teacher's response? He said, "Stop behaving like a dog. Behave like a lion." Like the author, you may be wondering what exactly that's supposed to mean.
Here's the key message. The first step toward radical happiness is breaking the cycle of thinking about thoughts.
Rinpoche's instructor explained by asking another question. What does a dog do when you throw a stone its way? Well, it chases after the stone, of course. This was the perfect analogy for what Rinpoche was doing with his thoughts. He chased after every thought that came to his mind without any forethought or reflection. Instead, Rinpoche needed to be like a lion. If a lion watched you throw a stone, it wouldn't go chasing after it. It would just quietly regard the thrower of the stones. Like the lion, Rinpoche needed to learn how to stop chasing after every one of his thoughts slavishly. Unfortunately, the state of chasing after our thoughts, which psychologists call mind wandering, is one in which most people engage frequently, about 50% of the time to be exact. Yet studies tell us we're happiest not while mind wandering, but when we're completely absorbed in the present moment. This state of present moment focus is what the authors call basic happiness, and each of us has the ability to cultivate it. To get started, try the following exercise, called creating space, for 5 minutes a day for the next week. Begin by sitting down comfortably and closing your eyes. Next, imagine that you're surrounded by an endless deep blue sky. Imagine this space as vividly as you can, extending all around you. If you notice that you've become distracted, just gently return your attention to the endless space. Creating space requires you to shift your attention away from the endless stream of thoughts and helps familiarize you with a state of non-distraction. It's the first step in cultivating present moment awareness.
Blink 3 of 9.
Think of the best party host you know. What does that person do when one of her guests is being disruptive and causing a ruckus? Truly great hosts won't try to argue with a belligerent guest or kick him out of the party. Instead, they'll find something for the guest to do. They'll offer him his favorite drink, a really tasty bite to eat, or an especially comfy chair. This gives the guest some way to occupy himself, relax, and calm down. Our minds are actually just like this disruptive party guest, in the way that they're always disrupting our enjoyment of the present moment. They jump from one thought to the next, and our reactions follow right behind. Luckily, we can treat our minds just like we would disruptive party guests, by giving them something to do.
This is the key message. You can placate your mind by practicing meditating with an object.
In the following exercise, you're going to practice giving your mind a job to do. In this case, that job is focusing on the breath. First, sit down on a comfortable chair with your back straight. Then, do the creating space exercise for a few minutes to relax and calm your mind. After that, open your eyes. Don't try to focus on anything you see. Instead, leave your gaze wide and relaxed and gently bring your attention to your breath. When you notice that you've become distracted, just bring your attention back to the breath. And that's it. This exercise is an example of meditating with an object. It fulfills the purpose of giving your mind something to focus on that isn't your thoughts. Here, it's your breath. By meditating in this way, you learn how to be present, regardless of any thoughts that may appear in your mind. You don't necessarily have to use your breath as your object of meditation. Instead, you can focus on a material object like a candle or a flower. You can even use sensations like a particular sound you hear. It's as simple as focusing on that object and returning your attention to it whenever you notice you're distracted. Eventually, you'll be able to meditate without an object at all. That's a more advanced activity that we'll discuss later. But first, let's look at another key to achieving basic happiness.
Blink 4 of 9.
Eric Solomon, the other of the authors, had a grandfather whose early life was rocky and turbulent. As a young child, he escaped the pogroms in Belarus and fled to St. Petersburg, Russia. But he never spoke much about those years. Instead, he focused on how grateful he was that his experiences led him to the United States, where he eventually met his wife. Most people will never have to deal with circumstances as extreme as having to flee from persecution. But the moral of the story is this. Instead of dwelling on whatever is bad in our lives, we can focus on the things we're grateful for. All too often, we compare our own experiences to those of other people, or to idealized fantasy experiences we dream up in our heads. But this tendency to compare distracts us from the present moment.
The key message here is, to achieve basic happiness, practice cultivating gratitude instead of comparing yourself to other people.
Naturally, not all types of comparison are bad. What you're trying to do is temper your automatic habits of comparison. A daily habit of gratitude is an extremely powerful way to do this, as it helps your mind focus on all the positives in your life rather than the negatives. To start, add the following exercise to your morning meditation routine. After sitting comfortably and spending a few minutes creating space, turn your attention to your breath. Every time you inhale, think, I am happy with who I am. And when you exhale, think, I am happy with what I have. Repeat this cycle at least 21 times, and then move on to your normal meditation practice. Another great strategy for fostering gratitude is starting a gratitude journal. Before you go to bed each night, think of one aspect of your life that you're grateful for. It could be a possession, a quality, or a circumstance. Whatever it is, write it down. Then, during your morning meditation, reflect on your nightly note of appreciation. If you don't have time to meditate, it's possible to do either of these exercises in isolation. They won't be quite as effective, but practicing gratitude in small ways is still better than not doing it at all.
Blink 5 of 9.
Meditation is a great, if slightly contrived, way to familiarize yourself with being in the present moment. However, it comes with a slight danger. If you can focus on the present only when you're meditating, you're still depending on particular circumstances to make you happy. And you already know that circumstances can't really make you happy. So it's very important to be able to bring your awareness of the present moment into your ordinary, everyday experiences too. That way, you'll be able to break free of your stressful thoughts and feelings and cultivate non-distraction, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. This is where mindful mini breaks come in. Short periods when you can stop what you're doing, drop everything, and be present.
Here's the key message. Throughout the day, take mindful mini breaks to refocus on the present moment.
The essence of a mindful mini break is simple. It just requires you to find a moment in your day when you can pause briefly, even for a single minute, and stop thinking about your thoughts. During this time, you should sit quietly and spend some time creating space or focusing on your breath. The best time to take a mini break is when you're feeling stressed and anxious. That's when it becomes all important to break the endless cycle of looping thoughts. Of course, it can be difficult to meditate when you're feeling particularly anxious. But in this case, you can use the anxiety itself as the object of your meditation. Focus on the feeling. Where is it located in your body? How exactly do you know you're anxious? Another problem for inexperienced meditators is that you might forget to take your mini breaks throughout the day. One solution is to use triggers that help remind you to take your breaks. Your trigger could be anything, like the sound of the bus or subway on your morning commute. For Solomon, his trigger was the horn blown by the taco truck that came to his office at 11:45 a.m. each day. As soon as he heard that horn, he would sit down quietly at his desk for a mini break while everyone else rushed out to get their tacos. And no, he never missed out on getting his own delicious tacos.
Blink 6 of 9.
What do you think would make you consider your life satisfying and successful? This is a big question, and it was the subject of a landmark Harvard study that followed the lives of 268 men over 75 years. The study came to the conclusion that the men who enjoyed warm relationships during their lives were by far the most likely to consider their lives successful. These men also lived longer, made more money, and had better marriages. The director of the study summed it up like this: happiness is love. Full stop. Oh, come on, you might be thinking to yourself. But just hold on a moment. We don't have to think about love in mushy, fanciful terms. Instead, we can think about it practically. Ultimately, love is just a warm relationship between and among people, right? And kindness and care are what constitute a warm relationship. Warm relationships help us cultivate interconnected happiness, the second component of radical happiness.
This is the key message. Interconnected happiness means living in harmony with those around us.
All too often, we view ourselves as independent islands. We take pride in the decisions we make, thinking that they are signs of our individuality and uniqueness. But this idea doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. So much of what we think, decide, and value is the result of factors like the culture we grew up in, the people we were raised by, and decisions other people made. To illustrate this, consider a common decision you might make. Say, choosing a bottle of wine at the local liquor store. You might be proud of what seems like an individual decision to buy that wine. But in fact, it was a product of a massive web of decisions and actions made by other people. From the humans who first discovered that fermented liquids actually taste pretty good, to the curator at the store who decided that the particular bottle of wine you chose was sellable. The list goes on. Why is this important? Well, it shows how little we're really responsible for our own behavior. Every reaction, decision, or achievement we make is the product of a huge web of interdependencies. The good news is you can free yourself from the illusion of separateness. Doing so is the basis for interconnected happiness, which the next blink will show us how to cultivate in practice.
Blink 7 of 9.
Next time you're having a meal, reflect on the food sitting on the plate in front of you. Envision the many people who contributed to you being able to eat that meal. Think of the employees at the store where you bought the food, the truck driver who drove it to the store, and the farmer who grew it. Then consider how the web extends even further. How did all the people you're thinking of, the store clerk, the truck driver, and so on, get to where they were? Someone had to have raised the truck driver. Another person had to have assembled her truck, and still another person constructed the road she was driving on. Find as many connections as you can. By doing this exercise, you're cultivating interconnected happiness, understanding how everything and everyone in the world is connected to and dependent on one another.
The key message here is: cultivate warm relationships by appreciating interconnectedness and wishing kindness on everyone.
When we cultivate a strong sense of interconnectedness, it becomes much easier to experience warm-heartedness as well. That's because understanding interdependence makes us more aware of how much we depend on one another. No matter who you are or the hardships you've had to endure, your life has been shaped by the kindness and care of others. You can foster warm-heartedness by remembering these kindnesses during your morning meditation. First, make a list of everyone who has offered you basic kindness or care at some point in your life. While meditating, after you've created space, recall one of the people on your list. Reflect on what that person gave you and honor the memory by cultivating gratitude. After you've done this basic exercise for a week or so, you'll be able to move on to resting in the light of kindness. This exercise is meant to extend your feelings of warmth a bit further. Start your morning meditation by creating space as usual. Then imagine a massive chain or web. The web consists of all the people who have offered you kindness or care, as well as the people who showed them care. Picture all of these people being bathed in the warm light of loving joy. Acknowledge that you and everyone else are here because of the kindness and care of others. Then rest for a few minutes by meditating with an object.
Blink 8 of 9.
It's no secret. Our brains are big judging machines. When we meet people for the first time, we start making judgments about them almost immediately. According to various studies, this happens within a few milliseconds. And a few short seconds after that, our judgments have already solidified. They're very difficult to change, even in the face of contradictory evidence. You can probably recall times when you judged people harshly, only to realize later that they weren't actually as horrible as you thought. Unfortunately, our tendency to judge gets in the way of cultivating warm relationships with others. By learning how to relax your judging, you can see situations much more clearly.
Here's the key message. Extend your feelings of warmth to everyone, even your enemies.
It would be a futile exercise to try to shut off your brain's judging mechanisms entirely. But you can learn to relax your attitude about your judgments, allowing you to keep an open mind. During your morning meditation, recall a time when you felt carefree and happy, perhaps when you were a child. Remember everything you possibly can about this time, but focus in particular on how it felt to be carefree and full of joy. Now imagine that the person you feel closest to is sitting in front of you. Share your feelings of joy with her, allowing their soft light to wash over her. A smile breaks across her face as she enjoys this feeling. Rest together in that vivid state of joy for a little while. Then allow a few other people to join in this feeling, perhaps your other close friends or family. Finally, expand the field of joy even further to include a group of people you like, such as work colleagues or other acquaintances. As you become better at extending warmth and joy, you can begin to include strangers, and even people who annoy you. Eventually, you'll even be able to extend warmth and joy to those who have done you real harm. Sharing joy with your enemies can be very challenging and takes practice. There's no need to beat yourself up if it brings up some turbulent emotions. But once you're able to share joy with even those people, you will experience a deep, interconnected happiness as you feel your warm-heartedness extending to everyone in the world.
Blink 9 of 9.
So you've been practicing focusing on the present moment, working toward basic happiness. And you've been cultivating warmth in an effort to obtain interconnected happiness. But aren't these blinks about radical happiness? A happiness that can stay with you no matter what circumstances you're in? Well, radical happiness is the natural byproduct of basic happiness and interconnected happiness. Radical happiness is breaking free of your habitual patterns of thinking and feeling, no matter how they manifest. By doing this, you are cultivating the quiet sense of confidence and self-respect that leads to dignity, the core of radical happiness.
The key message is this. Radical happiness comes with greater understanding and awareness of your own mind.
Up until this point, you've been practicing meditation with an object. This is a great way to learn how to focus on the present moment by giving your mind something to do. Now it's time to relax your capacity to cling to thoughts and emotions even more by learning how to meditate without an object. Thoughts and emotions aren't our enemies. The real problem is our tendency to cling to them. But we can relax that clinging and just allow our thoughts to flow through our minds like a river. That's exactly what we'll do in the following exercise. Start meditating as usual by creating space. After some time, focus on the breath. Then drop into the space of being a quiet observer of your thoughts. Notice whatever goes through your mind, but don't think about those thoughts. As each thought arises, simply observe it. You'll find that if you don't start thinking about it, it will naturally dissolve. End the session by focusing on the breath. As you do this exercise, you'll find that observing your thoughts as they arise opens up a small space in your mind. That space is one of awareness, presence, and knowing. And it is where radical happiness resides. And you don't have to be sitting down during a dedicated meditation session to access the feeling of radical happiness. It's something that's always available to you. As you become more accustomed to how awareness feels, you'll more easily recognize when you're distracted during the day, and you'll be able to break free of your thoughts and emotions. In doing so, you'll be left with the quiet dignity that comes with knowing your own mind.
You've just listened to our blinks to Radically Happy by Pakchuk Rinpoche and Eric Solomon.
The key message in these blinks is that radical happiness is a natural byproduct of two other forms of happiness. Basic happiness, which comes from being able to focus on the present moment, and interconnected happiness, which is the result of having warm relationships with other people. Each of these forms of happiness can be cultivated through meditation exercises, which help you break free of your negative habits, emotions, and thoughts. And here's some actionable advice. Take warm-hearted mini breaks. Whenever you have a few spare moments throughout the day, use that time to pause and take a warm-hearted mini break. Sit comfortably and quietly. As you inhale, think, "May all beings be free from sorrow and suffering." And as you exhale, imagine sending out the warm light of happiness from your heart. Bathe the whole world and all its people in the glow. Think, "May everyone be happy." Try completing this cycle for 3 breaths, but if you're able, do even more.
Got feedback? We'd love to hear what you think about our content. Just drop an email to remember@blinkist.com with Radically Happy as the subject line and share your thoughts.